Hey everybody, it's Scott here, and I want to think about assessment a little bit in this video and also multimodality. So we're right into the meat of the second half of this second semester here, and so I expect that you've all figured out a system that's working for you, and I'd love for you to share what things are working and what things you're still having a challenge with. But yeah, looking forward or to the end, or toward the end of the semester here, and thinking about assessment, it is a really important feature of student experience. And what I would like is if we can think pretty seriously about what are some of the goals of assessment, and then how can we involve students in meaningful ways in the process. So I'm going to pull up just a few journal articles here. And the first thing is to note all the various types of assessment. Of course, this is not exhaustive, but there's just a few here to point out. Self-assessment, peer assessment, and anyway, the list goes on. And this is something, if you have any questions about it or you'd like to talk through different versions or flavors of assessment with me, feel free to do that. But just always keeping in mind that, please, like, it's great. It would be great to look beyond a typical written test, multiple choice, true, false, whatever. Like, those things, they have their place and they can be useful. But one of the things that's standing out from the literature here is a couple of phrases. One is assessment of learning, and that, I think, is what we're most used to, probably what we're most comfortable with, the belief that a student has gained some type of knowledge or acquired some kind of skill, and that it's our job to draw out of them, or at least allow them to articulate or fill in a bubble in some way to demonstrate that that's something that they actually have learned. The trouble is that, well, there are a lot of issues with written tests, but one of the main ones is that, let's say, especially if it's something as simple as a true-false, randomness can actually explain a grade as much as intentionality. So what I'd like to encourage us to do is to think, how can we involve more intentionality in the process? And that means having creating assignments and then also assessments around those assignments that have students doing more things on purpose more of the time. That's where multimodality really comes in, and that's what I'm excited about. But ultimately, what I believe, at least one of the main things that matters here, is that in assessment, we can trick ourselves into believing that after a student's taken a test, that's some kind of reflection of what it is that they know. And it might be, but again, randomness is an issue. But what I'd like to argue is that we really don't know what the student knows. Even more important than that is we don't know what the student knows they know. And I would like to suggest that assessment, at least the richest forms of assessment that I can think of, start approaching that territory of us starting to know what the student knows about what they know, or knows as far as the limits of their knowledge and ability. So it's a really nice, this is from CRISP 2012. This is a table that talks about self-knowledge. So what I'd also like to challenge us to do is to think about how not only are we figuring out what students know, but how we can lead students through that process of even coming to know what they know, and then us figuring out what it is they know about what they know. So try to get assessment to that level, which is pretty wild. Again, this is where multimodality comes in. So multimodality, at least one of the basic ideas here, is that it assumes and takes advantage of the fact that we already communicate in multiple modes. And modes are basically the shapes or forms or flavors that communication can be packaged into in order to send and receive messages. So one of the most common that we'll deal with in a classroom is the mode of written text or of speech. We read each other through gesture a lot of times, where we send messages through gesture and even facial expression, things like that. Certainly we have others. Music, images, moving images. And Gunther Kress, he's actually one of the main voices in this area of research. He even argues that layout, what is on a page and how it's on the page there, can function as a mode. So what's awesome about multimodality is it's easy to work into the education experience. And it just starts with thinking, how could I get myself and my assignment to have students represent their ideas in various modes, in different ways. It could be pictures, colors, it could be sounds. So for instance, like if you had a student represent a math problem with objects. This is multimodality. This is taking the written form and transforming it, representing it into another form. So that's anyway. There's some real interesting possibilities there, and I'm just going to share one way that my co-teacher and I did this, and we inherited this, but I just love it, and we've tweaked it a little bit. So here, I just want to point out in this journal article that this would be something like a multimodal assessment of a particular project or presentation, and I'll even show later on how this could be something useful for like a website, which is the crowning representation of our students' research topics. So yeah, there are these different possible layers or levels, dimensions to think about and to assess, and the more questions that a student might be able to answer here, I would like to argue, is allowing them to think and act intentionally in terms of their assignment and their creation. That's great, right? Because they're doing more things on purpose more of the time. So did they do something with language on purpose? Is there a visual dynamic or dimension? And did they make decisions that they can defend? And it's that defense that ends up working as assessment. So as a student communicates to us why they did something, this, I think, is the best ground to start marking out as far as being able to offer something like feedback and a grade ultimately. Is what has the student done and what have they done on purpose in a way that they can articulate back. So anyway, so I just want to share a little bit from the class. Now this is a writing class. The final project was the research paper, and we built several stages into this paper. The first is a concept map, and I'll give you a couple examples of that. Second was an outline, and then we do 2 drafts, and then a final draft of the paper, and then we had students turn that final draft into a website, and then we had the students present the website, not present the paper, or just create another random presentation. But it was all connected, and you can already hear how this would be forcing students to take their ideas and represent them in all kinds of ways. So what we get here is students not only get a better understanding of their ideas, but they get a better understanding of their ideas. So it's actually really, really cool. Okay, so concept map. I think this is a fairly common idea, a tool. So I just had the students just like try to actually lay out everything they knew about a topic, even stuff that wasn't going to be in their paper. And the interesting thing is, as they took on this task, you can see that students represented their ideas differently with different colors and shapes and the way it was laid out. Anyway, so when you take the ideas and you start to cull them and boil them down to what actually the topic that you're going to focus on, which part of that map you're going to focus on, then you can create an outline. And what's interesting is you then force their ideas, which were spatially represented, into a linear form. So they have to start making really important judgment calls on how they're going to organize the ideas. It's not now it's not just laid out and showing something like a taxonomic relationship, but now they're showing this linear relationship that is about the flow of ideas and development over time. So that's a really, really important dimension to care about, and it also helps you prioritize things differently. So just forcing things from a map into a timeline, into an outline, it's already forcing them to consider their ideas and their understanding of their ideas in really, really interesting ways. Of course, then, once the outline's done, then we start involving peer assessment, peer review. And that goes through a couple of stages. Then we had the students submit a final draft, which is really for us to get a sense of the completeness, the wholeness of just the ideas represented in language. When they turn the paper into a website, that's when things get really interesting and really exciting. So I've just got a couple here. You can see that they're playing with colors, they're playing with layout, they're making decisions about what's bold, what's not, what to include. This is a website, so they're considering the type of venue it is. Again, this is how we think about ideas or messages packaged in different types of modes, different contexts. So they're thinking, how is somebody going to experience this website and consume it differently than they might a research paper or a thesis, a term paper. So this is about conciseness. It's about interaction. There's a really interesting, there can be some kind of interesting or goofy animated things that people might enjoy. And interactive pieces like a quiz. This is actually one of my favorite productions of the 3 semesters I taught that class. And it's about intimate partner violence, so domestic violence. What the person really kept in mind is that this person, the one who's interested in this, might actually be experiencing something like this. And so you can already get a sense, like from the colors, they're trying to communicate a feeling, violence, aggression, this red color just flashing at us, right? But then also here's some practical stuff. There's this hotline number, but then also using the affordances, this is a word that's become really important to me, the superpowers of the website. She built in a leave page button so that if this person ever feels uncomfortable while they're viewing the website, maybe their partner comes into the room, they can click on that button and it takes them to Google. Like, it's just brilliant, right? So they're thinking, who's the audience? What do they care about? How are they going to consume this? So they start making artistic and design decisions about the website, the layout and everything. So now, as you, the teacher, have been following them through this process, you can actually see how assessment is an ongoing cyclical thing. It's not just this ultimate experience where it's just, now we're at the end, now I want you to display everything you know. As we follow the students through these progressive assignments, ones that are incremental, that build on each other, we're actually assessing as we go, not just the ideas, but like the student's facility with those ideas, the student's ability to see the limits, the contours of their own knowledge, and be able to develop that, shape that, grow it, and implement it in a way that's meaningful to an audience. Like, that's huge. That's a big deal. So anyway, there's a lot about assessment that's worth thinking about. If you have any questions or ideas, let me know either in the comments or reach out to me directly. Anyway, thanks for watching, and best of luck as we move through the rest of the semester.